Okay, so let's talk about setting up a consulting business for yourself. Let's say that you're really good at graphic design, or you're really good at video editing, or really good at some sort of management process. Maybe it's change management. And you have an opportunity to go work for a couple of clients to help them with their change management. And you're gonna bill them for the work that you do, for your expertise, the knowledge that you have. That's consulting. And it's a great opportunity for people that have developed some skills to be able to sell those skills in the open marketplace. You could bill by the hour, you could bill by the project, you could do some value-based billing based on how much value is derived by your clients. But there's all sorts of things that you can do to set that business up for success. So the question is, do I need an LLC? And when do I need to set it up? Well, again, so we've talked about this in some other videos, but I just want to go over this again in just quick informational overview, and you can go to some of our other videos for some detail. The overview is this. You should set up an LLC for yourself if you are planning on doing this business for a long time. If it's just for a short time, you may want to wait, you may want to go with it. It doesn't really change much when it comes to your taxation. What it does is it gives you the ability, the flexibility to S Corp elect or C Corp elect your business. Then an LLC can be taxed differently than a sole proprietorship. And that happens by election. A sole proprietor, an individual, cannot be S Corp elect. You have to have some sort of entity first in order to be able to do that. And so if I'm just getting started, let's say that I have an opportunity to do some graphic design work and somebody wants to hire me and they're gonna pay me $5,000. Well, maybe I don't need to set up an LLC in that regard. Maybe I'm just testing it out to try to figure out if it's actually a viable business. If I don't do that, I still can write off my income, and I can write off the expenses that I had that were attributed to that income. So I could write off my subscription to some software. I could write off some of my supplies, perhaps some of my internet use, cell phone, meeting software, computers, all sorts of things that allowed me to do the work of collecting that $5,000 of income. And if those things are reasonable and necessary for my profession, I can write that off whether I'm a sole proprietor or I can write it off if I'm a single member LLC, meaning just me going off into business by myself. And so there's flexibility, and you have a lot of different options that are available to you right from the get-go that don't really require an LLC. You just have to understand that you're in business, and therefore you have some business tax deductions, okay? Then the other thing to be aware of here too is that when the business does become viable, now you want to be able to turn that LLC into an S corporation. So if I'm honest with myself and say, I'm gonna book this $5,000, but I really wanna be an entrepreneur and I want this to work, and I happen to be in a state that doesn't charge me a fortune to maintain an LLC, maybe it makes a lot of sense for me to do so. It's gonna force me to go get a different bank account because I'll have an EIN for that LLC. That means that the business is separate from me. And at a fundamental level, that's a good thing. The business should be separated from you. You should be thinking about it as its own healthy body, right? And so if that living, breathing body of this entity is working the way it should, then I am able to run it effectively. And then as a result, having a business bank account is gonna force you to think through, okay, I've got some money that I need for my bills for the LLC, and I've paid those and I still have some money left over. I can take a distribution or a draw on those funds. And that's a simple solution that doesn't allow you to, or doesn't force you to have to go on payroll right away. You do need to go on payroll when the LLC becomes a different entity. But you really make that decision because that is not a decision that you can go back and forth on. You make that decision when you know the business is viable and that it's making you money to the tune of $100, $150 or more, $150,000 or more of income to you. Once it crosses that threshold, there's different entity types, entity classifications that make sense. but that LLC will give you that option that a sole proprietor did not. If you end up going into graphic design and then you get so much work and you forget and you didn't go and set up an entity, we're going to be doing a lot of unraveling, or you're going to be paying a lot of tax on that first year, and then going through the process of setting up the LLC and the bank account and switching everything over on all of those. Like your merchant account from Stripe is going to have to be connected to a different bank account. There's just a lot of administrative things that you have to do when you set up a new bank account. So to some degree, the sooner you can decide if the business is viable or not, that's when you turn on the LLC. Once you decide that the business is actually providing enough, that's when you do some different S Corp, C Corp types of elections, and you go through that exercise to figure out what's the right taxation type. Now, one caveat to this, and we'll have a separate video on this later, but if this graphic design business is not just me, if it's me and a colleague, and we own the business together, you don't want to do two separate sole proprietors there. You want to have an LLC taxed as a partnership. So if you are still creating or figuring out viability, maybe do the sole proprietor thing for a very short period of time. LLC taxed as a partnership. That gives you the option to be able to go into work together. You do want to make sure that you talk to an attorney and talk to a CPA right away, because there are ways that you can write your operating agreement that will allow you to have separate treatments of profit and loss based on work performed. So for instance, if I go into partnership with someone else and we may own the business 50-50, but I do a little bit more work in generating revenue than the other person, I can have my operating agreement written up by an attorney that would allow me to now take more than 50% of the profit because I earned more than 50% of the profit. So there's things that you have to make sure that you've got your ducks in a row from a legal structuring perspective, that an attorney is essential to that process. So hopefully this gives you some inkling as to the why of an LLC. I think the great thing about LLCs and businesses is that it's entrepreneurship. You get to go and start working for yourself, and that's a good thing. And so we love working with small business owners. Happy to help you with any questions that you have, especially if you're just getting started. And hopefully this is helpful. Thanks.